Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we settle into a story about a caretaker who locked every door. There's something about the end of the day in a place like this. The retirement home at dusk has its own particular kind of quiet. Not the quiet of emptiness, though the hallways were nearly empty now. The day staff long gone. The evening visitors trickling away one by one through the front doors with their careful goodbyes and their lingering hands. No, it was the quiet of containment, of walls that had absorbed decades of slow mornings and shuffled footsteps, and the murmur of televisions kept low. A quiet that felt almost thick, the way still water feels different from moving water, even though water is water, and quiet is quiet. Owen knew this quiet well. He'd worked at Ashford House for 11 years. 11 years of evening rounds, of dimming lights and checking locks, of walking the same corridors in the same order with the same unhurried step. He was not a large man. He moved without noise. A habit? Or perhaps a gift. His shoes made almost no sound on the linoleum. His keys clipped to his belt loop. He had learned to hold still with one hand as he walked, so that even they did not jingle. He started, as always, at the east wing. The fluorescent lights in the east corridor flickered faintly at the far end. They always did, had done so for years. The maintenance request filed and refiled and always deferred in favor of something more urgent. Owen didn't mind. He had come to think of it as a kind of greeting, a small, unreliable pulse at the end of the hall, like something blinking awake. He walked slowly. There was no rush. The last resident had been settled by 8. Mrs. Galway in room 14, who always asked him the same question and always seemed satisfied by the same answer, though Owen had long since stopped being sure what either the question or the answer truly meant. She asked if the doors were locked. He said yes. She nodded. She closed her eyes. He moved to the first door on his left, room 1, a storage cupboard. He tried the handle. It gave, and he pulled it shut again and turned the key. The lock clicked with that particular finality that locks in old buildings have. Not sharp, not loud, but settled, as though the door had been waiting. Room 2, a bathroom, already locked from the inside earlier. He noted this and moved on. Room 3, a small sitting room, 2 chairs facing a window now dark, a side table with a vase of artificial flowers, pale in the low light. Owen stood in the doorway for a moment, as he always did. He looked at the chairs. He looked at the window. He pulled the door shut and locked it. This was the work. Not glamorous, not memorable, but Owen had never needed it to be. He moved through the east wing methodically, door by door, click by click. The sound of each lock turning followed him down the corridor like footsteps. A second set of steps, softer than his own, accumulating quietly at his back. He found this thought neither comforting nor unsettling. It was simply a thought. Thoughts came and went on evening rounds. He had learned not to attach too much weight to them. He turned the corner into the central corridor. The lights here were steadier, brighter. The linoleum floor reflected them in long, pale streaks, the way ice reflects light, flat and cold and just slightly too bright. A nursing cart sat against the wall, abandoned for the night, its surface bare, except for a single paper cup that someone had forgotten. Owen glanced at it as he passed. He did not stop. He tried room 9. The handle did not move. He checked his key. He tried it again. No, the door was already locked. He frowned very slightly and removed his hand from the handle. He looked at his list. Room 9 was a linen storage room. It was not supposed to be locked at this hour. The night staff sometimes needed access. He had locked it himself last Tuesday. And on Tuesday mornings, the day supervisor unlocked it. And so it went. He tried his key. It turned. He pushed the door open, checked inside. Shelves of folded sheets, towels, the smell of detergent, and then pulled it shut again without locking it. He wrote nothing in his log. It was a small thing. A mistake from a previous shift. These things happened. He moved on. He was halfway down the west wing when he noticed room 17. Room 17 was a resident room, currently unoccupied, had been for 3 weeks since Mr. Hartwell had been moved to the medical annex. Owen had walked past it on every round since then, had unlocked it twice for the cleaning staff, had locked it again each time. It was a room like any other, a bed frame stripped of its mattress, a wardrobe with its door hanging slightly open, a window with thin curtains gone pale from years of filtered light. The door to room 17 was locked. Owen paused. He looked at the door for a moment. Plain wood with a small brass number screwed slightly crooked, a detail he had never noticed before, or had noticed and forgotten, or had simply stopped seeing. He placed his hand on the handle and felt the familiar resistance of a locked door. Solid. Certain. He looked at his keys. He had not locked room 17 tonight. He was sure of this. He had not yet reached it on his round. He was methodical. East wing, central corridor, west wing. He never skipped. He never doubled back. He had not been in this part of the hall tonight. Until this moment. And yet, here it was. Locked. He stood with this for a moment. His first thought was the morning staff. Someone had locked it earlier in the day and not mentioned it. His second thought was the cleaning crew. His third thought, which arrived more quietly and stayed a little longer, was that he could not account for when the door had been locked, or by whom, or from which side. He raised his key. He unlocked the door. He pushed it open 2 inches. The room was dark. The curtains were drawn, which was unusual. He had left them open on his last visit. The wardrobe, he could see in the thin light from the corridor, was closed. He had never closed the wardrobe. Owen stood in the doorway for a long moment. The smell of the room drifted toward him. That particular smell of unoccupied rooms, stale and flat, holding the absence of people rather than their presence. Nothing moved. The curtains were still. The room was quiet in a way that rooms should be quiet. And yet the quiet felt dense somehow, the way a room feels dense when there is something in it that does not want to be seen. He pulled the door shut. He locked it again. He did not write it in his log. He told himself it was nothing. A draft had moved the curtains. A cleaner had closed the wardrobe and locked the door out of habit. Reasonable. Ordinary. The kind of small inconsistency that any large building accumulates over time, like dust in corners moved on to room 18. Room 18. Locked. He had not yet reached room 18. He stood very still in the corridor. The fluorescent light above him, not the flickering one, a different one, hummed at a frequency he had never noticed before. Or perhaps it had always hummed like that, and he had simply never been still enough to hear it. A low, persistent note, almost musical, almost like breathing. He looked down the corridor. Room 19, room 20, room 21. He could not see from here whether they were locked, but he could not walk to them, because he was still standing outside room 18, his hand not quite touching the handle, his keys not quite raised. He tried room 18. Locked. He unlocked it. A bathroom. Empty. He stood in the doorway for 3 seconds. He locked it again. He walked to room 19. Locked. Room 20. Locked. Room 21. Also locked. All of them. Every door on the west wing already locked. In the exact order he would have locked them himself. Owen stopped at the end of the corridor. He stood with his back to the last door, and his face toward the long, pale stretch of linoleum ahead of him. The corridor was empty. The lights were steady. The nursing cart was still visible at the far end, and the paper cup was still on it, and nothing had moved. He thought about his 11 years. 11 years of the same round, the same order, the same locks. He had locked these doors so many times that the motion had become automatic. Hand on handle, key and lock, turn, click, move on. He had sometimes wondered, in the way people wonder about automatic things, whether he would notice if something changed, whether the body's memory would override the mind's attention, whether he might lock a door and not quite remember doing so, and then arrive at the end of a corridor, already finished, and not know exactly how. He had wondered this in an abstract way, the way you wonder about things that will never happen. He looked at his keys. He looked at his hands. His hands were ordinary hands, a little worn, a little cold from the corridor. He could feel the weight of his keys against his palm, the familiar, specific weight of this particular set of keys that he had carried for 11. He knew each one by shape, by the slight irregularity of its edge against his fingertip. He turned and walked back to room 17. He stood outside it again. He looked at the door, at the brass number, slightly crooked, at the gap beneath the door, a thin strip of darkness, undisturbed. He pressed his ear very gently to the wood. Silence, and then, so faint he could not be certain whether he heard it or simply felt it, a vibration through old wood and old plaster, something that might have been movement, a settling. The particular stillness that comes after something has just stopped. He stepped back from the door. He told himself, old buildings move. Old buildings settle and shift and breathe in ways that sound, sometimes, almost like something else. He had worked in this building for 11 years. He knew its sounds. He was not afraid of a building, but he stood there for a long time, not moving, one hand still holding his keys. He thought about Mrs. Galway, who always asked whether the doors were locked. He had always assumed she meant the front doors, the doors that faced the outside. He had always assumed she was asking whether the building was secure, whether something from beyond those walls might find its way in. It was a reasonable fear for a woman of her age, in a building where the nights were long and the staff grew thin after hours, and the world outside could feel, Owen imagined, very far away. But standing now in this corridor, with all the doors behind him already locked and room 17 very still and the lights humming their low, patient note, he thought about the other possibility, that she was not asking about what was outside, that she had never been asking about what was outside. Owen completed his round. He walked back through the central corridor. He walked through the east wing. He checked each door and found each one already locked, as he had locked them, in the order he had locked them. He found nothing out of place. He found no one in any corridor. He found the building quiet and still and sealed against the night in the way it was supposed to be sealed. At the end of his round, he sat in the small staff room near the entrance. He made himself tea from a bag that had been used once already and set it on the table in front of him and looked at the wall. He thought about the locks. He thought about the order of things, the correct order, his order, and how the doors had been locked in that order before he arrived, as if someone had walked the round ahead of him, as if someone had learned, over time, the precise sequence of his steps, and had completed the work on his behalf, and had then gone very quiet. And this was the thought that arrived last, and settled deepest, as if the work had not been done to make the building safe, but to make it finished. Owen drank his tea. It was cold by the time he lifted it. He hadn't noticed. Outside, the night had fully arrived. The kind of dark that doesn't suggest the morning, that seems instead to be making a point about how long darkness can be when it wants to. A car passed on the road, beyond the gate, its headlights sweeping briefly across the entrance hall windows, and then gone. The building absorbed the light and gave nothing back. At 11:10, Owen stood, rinsed his mug, and went to do his second check. He walked to the east wing. He checked the first door. Locked. The second. Locked. The third. The sitting room with its empty chairs and its pale artificial flowers facing the dark window. He paused. The chairs had moved, not much, a few inches perhaps, turned slightly toward each other, as though two people had sat in them and shifted to face one another during a conversation, and then simply hadn't shifted back. The artificial flowers were the same. The window was the same. Only the chairs. Owen looked at the chairs for a long time. Then he pulled the door shut. He locked it. He moved on to the next door, and behind him, in the long, quiet corridor of Ashford House, the locks held. Every one of them. The building was sealed. The night was still. And whatever had arranged those chairs in the small sitting room at the end of the east wing, whatever had walked the round ahead of him, had learned his order, had turned each key with the particular care of something that wanted things closed. It was still inside, and so was Owen, and neither of them went anywhere at all. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even the locked doors can carry a story. If the stillness stayed with you, if the click of a lock settled somewhere deep, then let it remain a little while longer. Some doors, after all, were never meant to be opened. They were only ever meant to hold. Rest now, whatever walks these halls tonight. It already knows the way.